Toothless, Scene 3, The Cave, Part 4. As Curly ran for the exit, Albrecht continued to search for Franklin. Gripping his toothbrush tightly, Albrecht tossed aside risk and fear. He released his hold on the rock and stood with both feet in the water, scouring the surface for signs of Franklin. Albrecht, investigation, toothbrush modifier. 8. Success. Very difficult DT. There. By the light of the toothbrush, Albrecht could see Franklin. The doctor was distant and alone, curled in a ball of faint green light, encompassed by the water's darkness. It was surreal to see Franklin so far away while standing in water that lapped above his knees. While difficult to comprehend and impossible to understand, neither mattered to the mortician in that moment. Albrecht took a deep breath and dove into the water. Albrecht, nimbleness. 1. Failure. Difficult DT. Albrecht plunged into the water and quickly collided with the cave's rocky floor, scraping his balding head but not causing significant physical damage to himself. He flailed and rolled about in the water, sputtering and splashing as he attempted to regain footing on the slick underwater floor. Nein! The mortician screamed as he struck the dark, unforgiving water. Nein! He spun around angrily, violently hitting the water, desperately trying to regain that vision of Franklin. But the vision was gone. After a time, Albrecht stopped moving, giving the water a moment to settle. Black waters reflecting the dim blue glow of the toothbrush surrounded the mortician, and only the black silhouette of his reflection was there for him to see. Franklin was gone, and Albrecht felt the deep hollow of aloneness threaten to carve its hole once more. The Magi swirled and twisted in the dark abyss, fully aware of her vulnerable state. She knew what was done to the young man was wrong. She regretted going to the ringmaster as soon as the thought entered her mind. Over and again she asked herself, why? Why did she go along with all of it? Thoughts of her actions whirlpooled in her mind. Because of her, the charred young man now haunted these waters. She was convinced that her former friend would not stop his haunting, regardless of her apologies. There was nothing she could do to stop this. Yet, there was a way to escape. Bizarria pushed back the panic that clawed and threatened to shred her mind. She focused on freeing herself from this abysmal prison. Bizarria, dexterity, versus water, drain. 4 versus 3. Bizarria succeeds. Bizarria kicked hard and swam for the surface. She emerged from the dark, reflective water, gasping for air and reaching for anything that could support her. As she regained her footing, a screech was heard above, and a giant bat dove for the Magi. Giant bat, swoop, versus Bizarria, vanishing act. 2 versus 3. Bizarria succeeds. Bizarria vanished from sight and sound, causing the bat to swoop aimlessly through the air. The giant bat arced back up and returned to the jagged cave ceiling. Bez placed her hand on the nearby rock to brace herself and catch her breath. As she oriented herself to determine her escape from the water, the realization of her current location struck hard, and she jumped back, retracting her hand as if it had been burned. The rock she had braced herself on was the terrible statue in the cave's center. Bizarria did not know how or why she was next to this thing, but she refused to remain there. Quickly, the Magi waited and jumped to the next closest mineral spire. A system message indicated success as the magician scrambled up the stalagmite and tightly wrapped her arms and legs around the conical rock. She was out of the water, but just barely. Bizarria could feel the choppy waters lap against the heel of her boots. She tried to climb higher, but the rock was too slick. The safety of her newfound perch brought little comfort as the small, direful waves crept higher. Awesome! Panic floated on the edge of Bizarria's sarcasm, and a shrill laugh escaped her throat as she futilely kicked away the rising lake water. Franklin was cold, lost, alone, curled into a ball floating in an abyss. Maybe he was sinking. He couldn't tell. Fear of drowning to death kept him from breathing, despite his body's demands for air. As he remained suspended, slowly rolling over in the void, a small bubble of air escaped Franklin's nostril. It rose and passed his face. He watched it float upwards and suddenly realized that was the way up. That was his way out. Fighting the darkening despair that weighed heavily upon him, Franklin made his last attempt to swim for the surface. Franklin, stamina versus water, drain. 3 versus 2. Franklin succeeds. The dark waters burst forth as Franklin emerged, gasping from the release. He loudly inhaled the life-giving air, heaving to capture the oxygen his lungs so dreadfully needed. His foot slipped, and the doctor was back under the water, but found the rocky floor below and stood up. He was never so grateful to have that slick cave floor beneath his feet. He panted, coughed, and braced himself on a nearby boulder as he recaptured his lost breath. I got a 3. Franklin breathlessly chuckled to himself, grateful for the success. I can appreciate that. The medical examiner looked around the cave and suddenly felt lost. He sucked in large gulps of air as he struggled to remember why he couldn't wake from this nightmare. How did he get here? Albrecht hollered and waved excitedly from a distant corner of the cave and came running as best as he could through nearly waist-high water. Giant bat, swoop, versus Albrecht, intelligent dodge. 4 versus 11. Albrecht demonstrates exceptional success, +1 modifier to next action. Albrecht ducked underwater, effortlessly avoiding the bat's attack. The mortician popped back up and continued to splash his way to the medical examiner. Albrecht quickly grabbed Franklin under the arm to provide support and keep the doctor above water. Franklin's eyes were glossed and distant, as if he did not see what was in front of him. Franklin! Franklin! I have... Albrecht shook his friend slightly, attempting to get the doctor's attention. I have the toothbrush! We can get out of here! The doctor slowly shook his head and looked blankly at the mortician. It's a nightmare. A thing, Franklin whispered. It can't be real. We're okay, Albrecht assured his companion. He pulled the doctor's arm snugly over his shoulders and began leading Franklin to the nearby outcropping. We're okay. I got you. I got you. Franklin slowly waded with Albrecht toward another cluster of rocks jutting out of the water. The mortician began rattling off their current situation and motioning to a spot in the cave that they hoped would be the exit. It all felt muted as the medical examiner struggled to remember exactly what was supposed to happen now. He looked to his skills and used what he could. Franklin, rapid recall. 4, success. Normal DT. Memories rushed back to his mind like a raging torrent. Albrecht's rambling suddenly made sense. The dentist, the tunnel, the cave and bats, the rocks grinding and breaking, then the water rushing in. The toothbrush was found as well as a way out. Seeing the light in the corner of the cave, Franklin began to move with renewed vigor toward their potential exit. The large outcropping was halfway to the crack of light. Albrecht took Franklin's arm off his shoulders and had the doctor lean against the rock. Are you okay? Albrecht asked. Franklin nodded. The glaze that previously covered his eyes had been wiped away with a renewed attentiveness. I'm going to investigate the way out, Albrecht said, pointing to the light emitting from the corner of the cave. Franklin nodded again. He tried to speak but was unable to find his voice. The doctor was surprised at how weak he felt as he slumped against the rock when Albrecht let go. Several meters back, near the statue, a mighty crash of water was heard above the cave's waterfalls as Curly burst out from under the water. Albrecht started to cheer, but then wondered when had Curly disappeared into the water. Excitement eroded further as the mortician realized the cowboy and surrounding splashes of water were motionless, as if time had stopped in that location. Then The cowboy became distorted and was rapidly sucked back into the water, with the splashes flowing in reverse. Albrecht shrank in dismay at the sight. The waters rocked with increasing force, and small waves gently pushed the mortician back and forth. Albrecht did not know which was more horrifying, the experience itself or the possibility that he had witnessed such a severe glitch. Bizarria the Magi suddenly burst out of the water in the spot the cowboy had disappeared from. Albrecht was relieved to see she did not get sucked back in. The Magi flapped and splashed as she got to her feet. Albrecht was about to get her attention when he saw a bat swoop for the magician. In one swift twirl, the magician disappeared, leaving the bat to soar through air. Albrecht began to strongly suspect the system stability. Everyone had noticed minor glitches throughout the adventure, but an ominous paranoia began to accompany the recent observances. If the glitch was getting worse, it was time to finish this adventure. However, they needed to get to a safe location before anyone could attempt to log out. The mortician renewed his focus on their escape. Jogging was difficult in the rocking waters, but Albrecht pressed on toward the light, a light that held the promise of an exit. When Albrecht neared the light shining high through the cracks in the rock, he saw a pickaxe haphazardly stuck against the cave wall. He smiled, confident this pickaxe was the key they needed to escape the flooding cave. As the mortician grabbed the pickaxe, he felt a pull on his legs. Water. Pull versus Albrecht intelligent dodge +1 modifier. 6 versus 5. Albrecht fails. No! Franklin's voice felt weak and feeble as he cried out. Albrecht was gone, pulled under the water without a splash. The doctor unsteadily tread through the dark, opaque waters and frantically searched for Albrecht. Franklin, forensics. 1. Failure. Very difficult DT. Pale light from the crack above reflected and danced off the dark ripples. Amidst the rocking waters and cacophonous waterfalls, Franklin only found a dark, distorted silhouette of himself reflecting from the water's surface. He felt the pull and quickly retracted his leg, causing him to stand on one leg. Yet the pull caught Curly's other leg, and he could not escape. It was like a fathomless vacuum had suddenly opened beneath him. As he was sucked down, the pickaxe became caught on a rock and slipped through his hands. The cowboy desperately reached for the mining tool with outstretched arms, then attempted to grasp at anything that could stop his descent, but nothing was within his reach. Nothingness was all that surrounded him. It was a black, cold void where he floated. There was no up nor down. Direction seemed meaningless here. A subtle sense of dread began to creep and slither within, followed by a hissing thought that poisoned his mind. Where is the snake? The fear of the snake. The helplessness. It threatened to constrict Curly's soul in its coils. No. He refused to be locked motionless again. The cowboy would not be kept down by this fear. Curly, dexterity versus water, drain. 4 versus 3. Curly succeeds. Curly yelled back at the fears threatening to envelop him, and he swam. He kicked fast and hard, refusing to be trapped in the invisible coils of a suffocating abyss. The cowboy emerged from the water, still screaming in defiance against the unseen snake chasing him. He punched and kicked at the water before opening his eyes and seeing the snake was not present. "This damn boss!" Curly yelled angrily, throwing one more punch at the water. He had resurfaced and could breathe, but he noticed that he was now much further away from the exit. The water was chest-high in this location, and the eerie blue cave light was dimmer, with a tinge of green. Curly extended his arms and searched for something that could prevent him from being sucked into the water again. Curly, mustache sense. 3. Success. Normal DT. As the security guard felt his way around the darkening cave, his mustache helped guide his hand until it rested on something hard and rough floating nearby. He turned to focus his eyes and was suddenly elated with his finding. A pallet? I like it. The sturdy wooden pallet was floating within reach. Curly did not care how or why the pallet was here, only that it was. This floating debris allowed the security guard a chance to get out of the infernal lake water. Curly, dexterity. 4, success, normal DT. Curly quickly climbed aboard the floating pallet and clung to it like life itself. The waters had become choppy, making pallet riding less than easy. He lay prone with arms and legs extended, working hard to prevent the wooden platform from tipping over. The cave's stalactite teeth bearing down from above felt much closer while laying on the pallet, further encouraging Curly to remain low on the pallet. The cowboy quickly scanned the waters from his new vantage point. "More than one pallet?" he asked aloud. No other pallets were seen. Curly shrugged at the lack of response from the system. "I tried." The water's abyss held a certain familiarity. Perhaps familial quality was more apt. This was not Albrecht's first foray into an abyss. He looked around at the darkness and held up his toothbrush. Nothing happened. The light emanating from the toothbrush steadily dimmed and changed from blue to green. He shook the toothbrush, yet still nothing happened. Frustrated with the lack of help from his family heirloom, Albrecht exhaled gently, then watched where the bubbles traveled. As the bubbles rose, a vision of the evil grinning statue could be seen. The mortician recognized the haunting's attempt at communication, but with the toothbrush not cooperating, now was not the time to commune with the abyss. He quickly swam after the rising bubbles. Albrecht, nimbleness versus water, drain. 4 versus 3. Albrecht succeeds. Albrecht rose from the water, standing and shaking the wetness off his head. The mortician quickly took in his surroundings. The water was chest-deep, and Franklin stood several meters ahead. The doctor was now the closest person to the exit. "You okay?" Franklin asked. His voice cracked but was stronger than before. Albrecht gave a thumbs up as he spat out some water. "Go to that light!" Franklin nodded. He rushed to the crack and immediately saw the pickaxe precariously hanging on the wall. He secured the pickaxe and found an outcropping that allowed him to stand mostly out of the water. Dr. Meadowlark closed his eyes. Franklin, stamina attribute upgraded to level 5. Franklin opened his eyes and exhaled strongly. Invigorated with the increased stamina, the medical examiner reared back, raising the pickaxe high. He swung hard and strong, yelling at the obstacle blocking their escape. Franklin, stamina. 1. Failure. Normal DT. The pickaxe struck the stone wall at an awkward angle. Sparks flew, and the handle reverberated in the doctor's hands, causing pain to shoot up his arms. The cave wall was unscathed. Franklin's yell changed as the tone now reflected his pain and frustration. "Things really aren't working out tonight." The doctor shook out his arm as he groaned through painfully gritted teeth.